Hello and welcome. You are in an alternate reality where you are taking a VGA 111 class at this college because video games are just as meritable as English books, and welcome. I'm glad you're here. So, some of the older people in the room may be thinking to themselves, oh, what a world we live in now. Video games is like serious English test. And some of the young people may be thinking, what a world we live in. You know, it's kind of the same idea, just opposite spectrums. And both of them kind of have a faulty idea, if I'm being honest. So let's get into this. First of all, what is a video game? Pretty basic, right? Is it Super Mario, you know, jumping around, saving the princess, going the coins, all that stuff? Is it Call of Duty, a war-torn world, very serious, very gritty, very gun-heavy, very mature? Or is it even Among Us, that viral hit with the little astronauts trying to figure out each other, like, oh, who is the imposter among us? Who is sus here, you know? To that point, what is the story? Is it a hero's journey to stop the forces of evil from destroying the world? Maybe a giant turtle monster who kidnaps princesses? Is it a war-torn world struggling to fight for its survival? Maybe with many guns and a big letter M on the box? Or is it astronauts devolving into insanity as they no longer trust anyone around them? Or maybe it's a viral sensation. The point is, these lines have been blurred about what counts as a story, what counts as a book, what counts as a movie, what counts as a game. For example, on Netflix, there's a movie called Bandersnatch, which is like an interactive movie. You can kind of choose your path in the movie going through it. And like, is that even a movie at that point, or is it a game? I play this game all the time, Ace Attorney, with my friends here at college. And the feedback I always get from it, it feels like you're playing a book. Which is a weird criticism, to be honest. But like, playing a book, huh? Because like, there's no like functional reason, at least to me, that I see right now, that something like Huckleberry Finn should be of less or greater merit than something like Zelda, right? If you don't know Zelda, it's a video game series, Nintendo, all that stuff. You may be thinking to yourself, oh, of course, one's just a simple video game where they're saving a princess from some great evil. One is a thing that's been studied for hundreds, maybe not hundreds, but long time. So let's put that to the test real quick, right? Let's look at a specific Zelda game, and then maybe you'll see it more where, like, this has some more merit than you think. Let's look at, specifically, Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask, about you, the player, Link, going to destroy the great evil, in this case, Majora, who is threatening to kill the whole entire world, apocalypse style, with the moon coming down in just 3 days. Simple story, it seems, right? But let's think about what a story is, right? It's got an expedition, rising action, climax, falling action, resolution. And oh, once you think about it, in the game, you start out in the forest in the woods, you get the exposition that, hey, this guy's going to destroy the world in 3 days using that big scary moon up there. Do something about it. You get the rising action of the moon getting more closer and closer as a threat, imminent, getting more of its presence. You get the climax as the hero summons, which is the hero summons the giants to try and like hold off the moon as you go to destroy this great evil. You get the climax of the actually going against this great evil, Majora, right? And then you have the resolution where all is saved, everyone's happy, everyone goes about their separate ways, and it's all good. Huh. So, and like in this game, you have themes, deeper themes of morality. You find out that this kid, this guy with the mask on, he was a scared little kid growing up, always bullied, always like seen as lesser, to the point where he found this power in this mask one day, and it just got to him. He could suddenly do whatever he wanted. If he wanted to, he could bring the moon down and destroy the planet. But then, like as you go through the game, you learn more and more that he's a scared little kid describing us, the player, as the bad guy. And when you're bad, you're just supposed to run. That's fine. He talks like such a little kid. He gets you the question like, this is what happens to like the little, as you're tortured as a kid. Just like it gets you similar to how a book would, right? You question yourself, you question life, you question the things around you, how you treat people, and how they could end up destroying the world just when they have that ultimate power just somehow. You go through the game, you see complex characters, you find people reacting to this imminent threat of the moon. Some people are doubting it despite a very clear threat, which is more clear in real life with the recent events. But anyway, you see people like having that torture. You see like this married couple who like had such a like kind of almost divorce-worthy marriage, but then as the moon gets closer and closer and the end of the world seems more expected, you see them like struggle with it. You see them kind of reconcile. You see them accept their fate together, that they'll greet the morning together. And in the scene itself, it becomes heartbreaking, almost like you were reading a really good book or seeing a really good movie. It tugs at your strings, it makes you question. You see this other mom character who, like, in order to protect her daughter, the one thing she thinks to do, the only way she can think to, like, okay, I don't want my kid to experience this death of the destruction of the world, so she gives her child alcohol, just dull her senses. Like, you see these complex moments, these complex characters, like, and you feel it. There's also symbolism, just like a book, right? The ultimate power of evil itself through this mask of Majora. It's shaped like a heart with the spikes coming out. There's so many layers of there. The vulnerability from the fact that it looks like veins in it, like the eyes, the piercing eyes that like just keep staring at you, like similar how someone would look into an English book. They talk about, okay, why does this mean that? Why do the spikes come out like this? Is it because he means well inside? He's just a tortured kid and he's rejecting the world because the world rejected him. This is storytelling. Like, this is the same thing you'd see in an English book, because at the end of the day, what is a book if not an evolution of what we used to do with cave paintings, what we used to do as we sat around the campfire telling stories? It's just a natural progression of that. It led to books. It led to the radio when they started talking about stories over the radio to convincing degrees sometimes. They did it with films, and it just kept progressing as humans became more and more like, they were always addicted to storytelling, but they kept wanting a better way to show it, a better way to visualize it, a better way to experience it, which led to games. You get to see this evolution happen like in front of us. Like, you even get to see it like, because like this is the next step basically. This is where we see it grow. We're no longer just listening to a story. You're feeling this story. You are the character going through this. You are making these decisions as you get to see what the artist has crafted for you and get to see the world almost from their perspective. You get to see, you get to feel it. You get to see the impact that your decisions make. You get to, in that example before, like you could choose to not let the couple get together. You could kind of manipulate them in a way, and you get to see them heartbroken instead at the end of the world, sad. You can choose to not save the world. You can get the bad ending. You can let the moon come in. You can feel that consequences as the world is destroyed around you. Because you're not just listening to a story anymore. You're seeing it. You're seeing the visuals. You're seeing the powerful moon threat. You can look up at the sky. You can see it imminent, coming more and more towards you. You get to feel that fear. You get to see the people around you scared, in doubt, in denial. Because you're no longer just listening to a story. You're learning about it. You're learning how people could react in these scenarios. You're learning about a world. You're learning about how these people feel about this world. You learn about how people see the world and all this. Because you're no longer just listening. As I said, you're now deciding it. You're deciding what actions these people could take based on what you feel about the world and based on what's presented to you from the artist. Because you're no longer just listening to it. You're living it. And this is not even that big a deal already. Like, in classrooms already, this is a thing that's been happening, well, very small scale. There have been a high school teacher, Jonathan Ostison, where he did a semester of his English class where instead of English books, he used video games. He documented his experiences. He went from the beginnings, kind of like how a film class would, where he talked about the original text adventures. He's like on those like old computers where you have to type in like the directions and it's all just outputting text and you're going through it. And he would talk about how in those moments when you're making those decisions, when you're deciding where to go, I should have had water. Okay. Yeah, because you have to think critically, like, for example, like in those text games when you're like, okay, I'm deciding what would be the best course of action, similar to how when you're reading a book, you have to decide, what would this character do? You're now thinking, what would this character do? And then you can act on it. You can then go through with it. You can then choose your decisions and see the consequences directly, which is kind of what the point of storytelling was originally, right? It was to show, like, almost learning. Because at the end of the day, every English teacher's favorite question, like, so what? Who cares, right? So what? It's not like, you'll look at me and think like, it's not like I can go up to my English professor and be like, hey, I want to study this video game. I know more books, and they probably won't do, although they actually did let me do that once in high school. So that was fun. But you're thinking like yourself, at the end of the day, they're just games, you'll say. They're just books. They're just movies. And to that, I say, maybe you're missing the point about why we even started an English class as like a subject, right? Because like some people will think to themselves like, oh, why do I have to go here? Why do I have to learn about these books that are so old, right? they can't relate to them anymore, which is its own situation. But the reason we're looking at those books in the first place, the reason we are like analyzing them and seeing these different worlds that they live in, it's to like get up your critical thinking skills, get up your analysis, to like have that decision building be taught to you. Like you can see all these different worlds in these books, and that was like the original point to you analyzing of the depth, right? And that kind of seems to be lost, at least from the people participating like in English classes nowadays. But then that's why video games can kind of be an important step to like get people to see that. If you have them look at it the same way they used to look at English books, they might understand and be more thoughtful about their decisions in life. They'll be able to see like, hey, I did this decision because this. I chose to go jump over there instead of over here. I chose to do this with this character, to talk with this character, to make amends with this because I wanted to see what would happen. And now I see, hey, these actions have consequences. These, I can like, you can see it firsthand, and you can start thinking and analyzing. Okay, now I can go do that. Now I can go save the monster. Now I can go kill the monster. And all these different decisions just kind of add together, and they kind of create who you are. They create, like, you know, in the past, people would think about like, oh, their favorite book, like some of the college like admissions tests. They'll ask you like, tell about a book that's inspired you. And the reason they do that is because of this, because they want to see how almost like you've been turned into a person, how you've been matured based on what you've like looked into, what you've thought about, what you've analyzed, because it's kind of a reflection of yourself almost. For example, with me, I love the video games Ace Attorney. Everyone who knows me, I won't shut up about them because, you know. And with that, I find myself, as I think about it and I analyze those stories, it's just about a lawyer, which some people think is a weird concept for a video game, but like, I think about myself and how I act and how I think there's always like a solution, which I find is very similar to the themes of Ace Attorney, where it's always about like, no matter how dire the situation, no matter how rough it is, there's always a turnabout, there's always a reversal, there's always a way out of it to prove that what you believe is true to be true. And I find a lot of my ideals come from this. And to the point where, like I said, it just kind of ends up being about your life. The whole point of these classes of English, the whole point of books in the first place, the whole reason we write stories, the whole reason we tell stories, to show all these different lives that are being lived, and all these lives that you can live, all these lives that have been lived. It ends up being an interesting thought, you know? Because like, for most people nowadays, it's more of like a movie thing, right? They'll see a movie and they get impacted so much. Like, people talk about how like they are impacted by movies and stuff, which is kind of the current trend. But then like the generation under us is like getting all these video game experiences. They're getting all these lives lived there, and they're being influenced by it, which is why it's even more important to be kind of critical and think about like, oh, how are these being crafted? How are these being told? How are these being experienced? Because at the end of the day, that's kind of what it's all about. Should not have talked that fast. Anyway, so yeah, that is why I think it's very important to like look into this stuff and care about this stuff and actually see the worlds of all these people. Because if you ask anyone like under the age of like 20, I guess, they'll tell you about their favorite video game. They'll tell you about how they were influenced by it, how they like almost learned from it in a way, even though they might not even realize it. So yeah, thank you. Yeah, like kind of like I was saying, like it's just another form of the medium, right? Like there are like mindless games where you're just tapping the button to win, for example, which is a weird genre on the phones. But like you said, like just kind of like the parallel there, like just as there's always going to be like kind of bad books, bad movies, there's going to be bad games, and also great games. It's just another form of expression, you know? Well, technically yes, like there are like specific like things people analyze, but kind of like how like when you think about books, like what makes like a good book, right? They'll say, oh, it's because the characters mean something, the story is impactful, the setting, like I'll talk about all those things. And in a similar way, there are steps for those video games, right? Like, oh, how the characters interact, how like it feels to play, how well it flows, how well it looks, how like the style of it, in that same way. And with video games aren't as like professionally critiqued, so there's not like a specific set yet as of now. But I just want to bring up the point, like, at the end of the day, that is subjective, where, like, the books are subjective, too, because, like, someone could say, oh, this book has great characters. Someone else could say, this book has terrible characters. It's just a matter of, like, kind of how well you're able to articulate your point and, like, show evidence, as they always said in English class. So thank you, though. Yeah. Yeah. So to that point, right? So there is a concern that like you're playing a killer, for example, that you make it violent. And I want to mention two things about that. For one, the when your video games can also, as in addition to all this stuff about how like they kind of show your life and how you can see all these other lives, you can literally see this other life. You can get to see that world where that is true, and you can see the consequences of like, wow, you are killing all these people in a violent game, for example, and you see they're, you know, you kind of get the impact like everyone around you is dead. And in fact, there are some video games that like kind of take that to an extreme where like they really drive home like, hey, this is messed up. Like this is like you see the impact. These people have lives. These people have families. There was a game a couple years ago called Undertale, which really drove that point home. In fact, some people like donated to the Pope to kind of show like the morality in games, which was an interesting experience because like it would show you in that game like, hey, you see that you kill someone and you see like you feel like a monster because you see them like have lives. You see how kind of like I showed like they all have their own little stories and like so just yes, it can lead to that, but it can also lead to the other way, which is why I think it's important to kind of critically analyze this and see how they can affect like us as stories have for like all these generations. So I think it would lead to more engagement because, at least from my experience, when a teacher assigns an English book, the most common thing I hear from students is that they didn't actually read it or they just skimmed it anyway, right? So at least if they are still playing around with it, the English teacher can then probe at them in class. Like even if they are just playing like in the classroom itself, they can then probe, hey, what did you think when you did this? And because they're playing it, they're actually experiencing it so they can have the chance to actually have an opinion, to actually engage in the classroom as well. So I think it would lead to more. All right, cool, thank you.